Hey everyone, we are finally getting into spring. The bass literally just went on pre-spawn patterns probably about a week and a half ago is when I started seeing fish pulling up and kind of changing what they were feeding on. So as we get into spring, there's going to be a lot of different baits you can throw. It's my favorite time of year to fish, favorite time of year to guide. Honestly, it makes my life a little bit easier because the fish are just hungry. You know, they're moving up out of that deeper water, their metabolisms have been slow, they're kind of lethargic. So you can get them to feed, but as this happens, they're going to start getting easier and easier to catch. So I want to go over 5 baits that are going to be on the deck of my boat. If you book a trip with me, these are some of the things we're going to be throwing. There's plenty of other things they could be throwing, maybe even a couple little secret baits that I've left out here. But these 5 should be tied on, and I guarantee you these are going to help you catch fish. So starting off, and that's a jerkbait. Oops. Jerkbait here. I throw a couple different kinds. I've been throwing the 97 size, 6 cents provoke, the new one, just because it's a little bit smaller profile. But then, you know, the larger Provoke series, the Megavast 110s, all these are going to be really good baits. But this is a good bait earlier in the pre-spawn season as the water's still kind of cold, hasn't really warmed up that yet, they're not on beds yet. This is going to be a good bait where you can put it up around cover, twitch it, and just let it sit there. A lot of times I'm still giving it those long pauses, even though the water's not as cold as in the wintertime when I'm really letting it sit there. But a jerkbait's going to catch a lot of fish. Also out on Lake Decker, I've been tearing them up on this just because you can get it, you know, you pick one that's going to be dives down to the right depth to stay just over the top of the grass. Excellent bait to work real aggressively and then just let sit there. A lot of the bites we've had have come on the pauses. So jerkbait's the first one. Up next is a crankbait, but in particular a finesse type crankbait, something better in colder water. So this is the new pressure series from 6 Cents. I've also been throwing some money badgers from Berkeley. I've been throwing some storm wiggleworts. So a variety of baits, but what they all have in common is the action of them is a much more tight finesse wobble to it. You know, you can catch them on some square bills at times, but a bait that's got a much wider, more aggressive wobble doesn't usually work as good in cold water. And think about it, you know, the bait fish out there, the crawfish, you know, everything else that's in the environment that the bass are feeding on, their metabolism slow down. They're a little bit more lethargic. They're not darting around like they've had 10 cups of coffee. So mimic that action with your crankbait. Something that's got a tighter wobble to it. A shad wrap is another one I forgot to mention. All excellent baits. You're still trying to trigger some reaction strikes. So when you're fishing these, lots of stops and starts. Vary the speed of your retrieve. You all burn it and then it'll slow way down. Speed it up. Go kind of a medium speed retrieve. Lots of little pauses. You get the idea. But like I said, medium diving crankbaits. Something that you get down close to the rock, close to that cover, outside of those spawning areas. That's going to be a really good bait right now. Next one up is going to be a fluke. So something I should mention is when I'm targeting these fish during these pre-spawn type of patterns, think about where they're going to spawn. Those flats, those areas back up inside coves, back behind marinas, places protected from the wind, protected from boat traffic and waves. That's where they want to spawn, right? So now start looking outside of that, stuff closer to the creek channel, stuff closer to the main lake. Those are the places these fish are going to go, and then from there they're going to find cover. Whether it's a brush pile, a rock pile, a ledge, anchor blocks. There's all kinds of structure on Lake Travis. Grass, now there's a lot of grass out there. So you want to fish baits that are going to get down to that stuff, get around that. And one of those that I like throwing this time of year and all the way through, you know, the end of spring, even into early summer, is a fluke, especially a weightless fluke. So if you want to go big, they've got, you know, a couple different sizes. The flush from 6 Cents. This is a really good one with a kind of cool little like wings, little fins on them. This is a real good one. And then of course you can't beat just, you know, a Zoom Super Fluke. Love these things. But most of the time I'm rigging these weightless. I will sometimes use a belly weight if it's real windy. But this is going to be a good bait when you're up around grass or you're up around brush and you need something a little bit more weedless. Because similar to the jerkbait, you can kind of twitch these things aggressively and then pause and they just kind of subtly fall to the bottom looking like a dying bait fish. This is a really good one. This is something I'm going to have tied on, like I said, all the way up until summer. And, you know, especially during the shad spawn. But starting right now, a fluke. Next up, and this is kind of along the same lines, a bait that you're going to be able to get up there close to cover, but then just let it slowly fall. And that's a good old Wacky Rig. A lot of times I like to use a Wacky Rig hook that's got a little weed guard to it, and you can't bait a good old stick bait. Senkos, dingers, any of these things, you know, green pumpkins, watermelons. The water on Lake Travis is kind of known for being clear. But even on the upper end, I was just out there yesterday around the Lago Vista area where I've been fishing, the water was several feet clearer than it has been. So, you know, those more natural color baits are going to work really good. But this is another one that I love to fish when I'm around structure like docks, or if I'm looking at my 360 or live scope and I can see there's something on the bottom like a rock pile, or you get those big anchor blocks around the docks. The bass love those things. This is a good bait where you can pitch that up there and just very slowly fish it. Because especially early in the pre-spawn season like we are right now, these fish are getting more active, but they're still not, you know, super aggressive. So sometimes slowing way down, and especially on those days with those high barometric pressure days, very little wind, sometimes they don't want a moving bait. So that's kind of why I started with the moving baits, and now we're moving into these slower, you know, worked plastics. A Wacky Rig is going to be a really good one. And then last but not least, especially if you guys know me, you know I couldn't leave this one out. That's going to be the drop shot. I catch a ton of fish on the drop shot, okay? I am like a master of throwing this thing. I will throw it anywhere, everywhere, all times a year. But the way I fish it and the way I rig it changes a lot. So got a couple baits to show you there, but what I've got set up here, and this is kind of for fishing either the lower end of Lake Travis or Lake Decker, and that's a weedless drop shot. So show you what I have here. First off, a cylinder weight, okay? Now this is 3/8 ounce. This is too heavy for fishing the grass. We were fishing this deeper. But you can very easily take these weights on and off just by pinching them off. So I prefer to use these, the type with the line pinch holes. I make these myself. I'll put this back on there. But this way you can change them. So if you're fishing around shallow cover and grass, go with a 1/4 ounce or less. Deeper than that, like if I'm fishing rock, I'll use the heavier weight, but I will oftentimes change the hook to a normal drop shot hook. But this is what's important for fishing around the grass, and that is the extra wide yap hook. I hope you guys can see that. But what I use is a 1/0 extra wide gap hook, and you can see how I Texas rig it so that this thing will slide through the grass. What you're going to find during the pre-spawn season is these fish that are moving up out of deep water. A lot of fish also suspend and they stay out in the creek channels or the river channels, and you can pick them up on sonar, but they're a lot of times very hard to catch. Nowadays with the advancement of live scope, a lot more of these fish are being caught because you can now see them. But what those fish are going to do is they're going to make this migration up towards these spawning areas, but they're not going to beeline it to the back of them. And that's where a bait like this comes in. Grass edges. I've been catching a lot of fish off deep grass edges lately, and this is something that I'll use. So what you can do when you're out there in your own boat is get on your side imaging and start graphing around. And you'll notice, depending on water clarity, the grass only grows to a certain depth. After a certain depth, it doesn't get enough sunlight for photosynthesis. That's why it stops growing. But when you stop seeing the grass, it kind of keys you in on the depth to be looking for. So for example, if you stop seeing it at 16 feet, keep searching, 16, 17 foot using your sonar, and you can find the edges where the grass grows out off the bank and then stops. Fish those edges. And a weedless drop shot is one that I've been catching a lot of fish on because you can throw it in the grass, dragging it through the grass, and then going out past that edge. So a lot of it's by feel. You'll be feeling it catch them on the grass, and then when you stop feeling it, fish it like 8, 10 more feet so you know you're past that grass edge. And oftentimes that's the area where these bites are going to come from. So worms, obviously, I throw a lot of straight tail worms. I'll show you a couple here. Zoom trick worms, I buy these things, probably every time I order them, I buy like 20 packs at least. But a good Zoom trick worm. Obviously, the staples, the margarita mutilator robo worms. But then one that I also like a lot are these little glitches from 6 cents. Especially when I get a little bit further into spring and you're fishing around when the shad are spawning. A lot of the shad in Lake Travis on the lower end lake are smaller gizzard shad. These things kill it. You can also, they're big enough that you can still rig them weedless. You can also rig them with a normal drop shot hook if you're not fishing around the grass. But these 3 baits are going to be really good. So like I said, right now the fish are in pre-spawn patterns, but this is going to continually change as the water temps increase. So keep an eye on your temp sensor whenever you're out there on the lake. You want to be looking for water temps. The higher they are, the shallower the fish are going to be, kind of, as a general rule of thumb for this time of year. But keep in mind, you're going to have fish on pre-spawn patterns, actively spawning, and post-spawn as we get further into it. Fish, different populations of them do different things at different times. So you're not always going to be targeting, the same pattern. You can do different things. But these 5 baits that I just went over here, keep these rigged up. I guarantee you're going to catch a lot more fish. And for those of you looking to learn, I offer a poaching trip. With these trips, it's all about education. We're going to cover things like patterning bass, finding fish, using your sonar to locate them, what baits, I got a whole bunch of baits here, but not all of them work at, all the right times. We'll cover stuff like that. And then for those of you interested, we can do electronics trip at the end of it where we cover, going over sonar. So a lot of different things. And then if you just want to get out there and catch a bunch of fish, now is the time of year to start booking. Still got some openings in May. April's pretty open, and April's one of my favorite months too because that's when the shad spawn. But March, April, May are excellent months for fishing here in Lake Travis and Lake Decker and just the Central Texas area in general. So hop on my website or give me a call, 512-910-7255 or LakeTravisFishingGuide.com. Hit me up on there and let's get you out there on the water. Thanks for watching.